The starship Horizon glided through the inky void, its sleek hull reflecting the distant starlight. Inside, Robert Palmer's heart raced as he peered out the observation deck's window. Vernalis loomed ahead, a verdant jewel suspended in space, its twin moons casting a ethereal glow across its surface. Robert ran a hand through his disheveled brown hair, his blue eyes wide with anticipation. 6 years of rigorous training had led to this moment. He was about to become one of the first humans to set foot on an alien world. Attention all passengers, we are beginning our descent to Vernalis. Please secure all loose items and prepare for atmospheric entry, the ship's AI announced. Robert hurried back to his quarters, double-checking his research equipment. His mind whirled with questions. What mysteries would Vernalis hold? How different would the Vernalians truly be? The ship shuddered as it pierced Vernalis' atmosphere. Robert gripped his seat, knuckles white. Minutes later, a gentle thump signaled their landing. Welcome to Vernalis, the AI chimed. Local time is Oro 900 hours. Ambient temperature is 22 degrees Celsius. Oxygen levels are within human tolerance. You may now disembark. Robert's legs wobbled as he stepped onto the boarding ramp. The air hit him first, crisp and sweet, with an undercurrent of something alien. Then the colors overwhelmed him. Every shade of green imaginable painted the landscape, from emerald grass to jade leaves on towering trees. A delegation of Vernalians waited at the base of the ramp. Robert's breath caught in his throat. They were undeniably humanoid, yet utterly alien. Smooth green skin gleamed in the sunlight, ranging from pale mint to deep forest hues. Their eyes were larger than human norm, with vertical pupils like a cat's. One Vernalian stepped forward, her movements graceful and fluid. Robert found himself mesmerized by her eyes, deep violet pools that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Welcome to Vernalis, Dr. Palmer, she said, her voice melodious. I am Nemera, Chief Xenobiologist of the Vernalian Science Academy. I'll be your research partner during your stay. Robert extended his hand, then hesitated, unsure if the gesture would translate. Nemera tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. After a moment, she mirrored the motion, her three-fingered hand cool against his palm. It's an honor to meet you, Nemera, Robert managed, his voice rough with emotion. I can't wait to begin our work together. Nemera's lips curved in what might have been a smile. The honor is ours, Dr. Palmer. Your arrival marks a new era of interstellar cooperation. Please allow me to show you to your quarters. As they walked, Robert's head swiveled constantly, trying to take in every detail. The architecture was a harmonious blend of organic shapes and advanced technology. Buildings seemed to grow from the very earth, their surfaces alive with bioluminescent patterns. Your people have achieved an incredible balance with nature, Robert remarked. On Earth, we're still struggling to repair the damage caused by centuries of industrialization. Nemera nodded, her expression solemn. We learned long ago that true progress can only be achieved in harmony with our world, not at its expense. Perhaps our peoples can learn from each other in this regard. They arrived at an elegant structure that seemed to be made entirely of living wood and crystal. These will be your quarters, Nemera explained. They've been adapted to human physiology, but please let me know if you require any adjustments. Robert stepped inside, marveling at the seamless integration of nature and technology. A holographic interface sprang to life at his approach, displaying environmental controls and communication options. This is incredible, he breathed. Thank you, Nemera. When can we begin our research? A flicker of something, amusement, crossed Nemera's face. Your enthusiasm is admirable, Dr. Palmer. However, I suggest you take some time to acclimate to our world. Rest, explore the immediate vicinity. Tomorrow we'll begin in earnest. Robert nodded, trying to mask his disappointment. Of course you're right, and please call me Robert. Very well, Robert. Nemera's violet eyes seemed to study him intently. Until tomorrow, then. As she turned to leave, Robert blurted out, Would you like to have dinner with me tonight? To discuss our research plans, of course. Nemera paused, her head tilting in that curious way again. That would be interesting. I'll return at sunset. After she left, Robert collapsed onto the bed, his mind reeling. He'd done it. He was on an alien world, about to embark on groundbreaking research with a brilliant alien scientist. And if he wasn't mistaken, there was a spark of something more between them. The next few days passed in a blur of discovery. Robert and Nymera ventured into Vernalis's lush wilderness, cataloging plant and animal species unlike anything on Earth. They worked seamlessly together, their different perspectives often leading to breakthroughs neither could have achieved alone. But it was Nymera herself who fascinated Robert most. Her intellect was staggering, her curiosity insatiable. Yet there was something mercurial about her behavior. One moment, she'd be laughing at his jokes, her eyes sparkling. The next, she'd grow distant and cold, as if remembering some unseen barrier between them. On their 5th day of fieldwork, they discovered a new species of bioluminescent fungi. As they crouched together, examining the delicate structures, Robert became acutely aware of Nymera's proximity. Her scent, something like citrus and ozone, filled his senses. "Remarkable," Nymera murmured, her face inches from his. The chemical process generating this light could have immense applications. "Yeah," Robert agreed, barely hearing the words. "Remarkable." Nymera's eyes met his, and for a moment the air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Then she abruptly stood, putting distance between them. "We should get these samples back to the lab," she said, her tone businesslike. Robert sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Nymera, can I ask you something?" She nodded, her expression guarded. "Have I done something to offend you? Sometimes it feels like you're pulling away from me." Nymera's eyes widened in surprise. "Offend me?" "No, Robert. You've been nothing but respectful and professional." "Then why the hot and cold act? One minute we're laughing together, the next you can barely look at me." Nymera was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the glowing fungi. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I find myself confused by you, Robert, by the way you make me feel." Robert's heart leapt. "And how do I make you feel?" She met his eyes then, vulnerability clear in her violet gaze. "Alive. Aware. In a way I've never experienced outside of... But that's impossible." "Outside of what?" Robert pressed. Nymera shook her head. "It doesn't matter. We should focus on our work." "It does matter," Robert insisted. "Nymera, I feel it too. This connection between us. Why fight it?" "Because it shouldn't exist," Nymera burst out. She took a deep breath, visibly calming herself. "Robert, there's something you need to understand about my people. Something that makes any deeper relationship between us impossible." Robert's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Nymera stared at him, confusion clear on her face. "Wait, you don't have a mating season?" The question hit Robert like a splash of cold water. "A what?" "A mating season, a specific time when your species experiences romantic and sexual attraction." Robert blinked, trying to process this information. "No, humans don't have anything like that. We can fall in love or feel attraction at any time." Nymera's eyes widened in shock. "But how do you function? How do you focus on anything else?" "We manage," Robert said with a wry smile. "Are you saying Vernalians only experience those feelings during a specific season?" Nymera nodded. "Once a year, when the lumina flowers bloom. Their pollen triggers hormonal changes in our bodies. Outside of that time, well, not asexual exactly, but romance and physical intimacy simply aren't part of our lives." Robert's mind reeled. "But you said I make you feel alive, aware. If it's not your season, how is that possible?" Nymera shook her head, looking as confused as Robert felt. "I don't know. It shouldn't be possible. And yet..." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Robert understood the true magnitude of the gulf between their species. But he also saw a bridge, fragile and uncertain, but undeniably real. "Maybe," he said softly, "we have more to learn from each other than we realized." Nymera nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Perhaps we do, Robert. Perhaps we do." As they gathered their samples and headed back to the lab, Robert's mind buzzed with questions. He'd come to Vernalis seeking scientific discoveries, but he'd stumbled upon something far more profound, a mystery of biology, culture, and the very nature of love itself. The Vernalian sun cast long shadows across the laboratory as Robert and Nemera pored over their latest data. 2 weeks had passed since their revelatory conversation in the forest, and the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Robert glanced up from his holographic display, catching Nemera's eye. She quickly looked away, a faint darkening of her cheeks betraying her discomfort. He sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Nemera," he said softly, "I think we need to talk about this." She stiffened, her long fingers hovering over her own interface. "This? Us? These feelings? The way things have changed since I learned your species exists in a constant state of emotional chaos?" Nemera's tone was sharp, but there was a tremor beneath it. Robert couldn't help but chuckle. "I wouldn't call it chaos. More like potential, opportunity." Nemera turned to face him fully, her violet eyes wide with genuine curiosity. "Explain it to me, Robert. How do humans navigate these constant feelings without losing themselves?" He leaned back in his chair, considering. "It's not easy. There are heartbreaks, misunderstandings. But there's also joy, connection, the chance to build something deep and lasting with another person. But how do you focus? How do you achieve anything when your mind is so preoccupied?" Robert smiled. "Love isn't a distraction, Nemera. At its best, it's a source of strength, of inspiration. It pushes us to be better versions of ourselves." Nemera shook her head, clearly struggling with the concept. "On Vernalis, our greatest achievements come during the non-mating seasons. Our minds are clear, uncluttered by emotional entanglements. We push the boundaries of science, create breathtaking works of art. And during your mating season," a flush crept up Nemera's neck. "It's intense, primal, beautiful in its way, but hardly conducive to higher thought." Robert leaned forward, his voice low. "What if there was a middle ground? A way to experience both intellectual fulfillment and emotional connection?" Nemera met his gaze, something vulnerable flickering in her eyes. I don't know if that's possible for my kind, Robert." "Maybe it is," he said softly. "Maybe that's why you're feeling these things outside your normal cycle. Maybe we're more compatible than either of us realized." The air between them grew thick with possibility. Nemera's lips parted, as if to speak, when a sharp chime cut through the tension. "Incoming transmission from Earth," the lab's AI announced. Robert groaned, reluctantly turning to the main view screen. The face of Dr. Elena Rossi, his former mentor and head of the Earth Vernalis exchange program, filled the display. "Robert, good to see you," Elena said, her tone clipped. "We've got a situation developing. I'm sending a larger contingent of researchers your way. They'll be arriving within the week." Robert blinked, caught off guard. "More humans? But we're still in the early stages of cultural exchange. Won't that be overwhelming for the Vernalians?" Elena's expression hardened. "This isn't up for debate, Robert. The powers that be want to fast-track our presence on Vernalis. Your job is to make sure the transition goes smoothly." The transmission cut off abruptly. Robert turned to Nemera, apology written across his face. "I'm sorry, I had no idea they were planning this." Nemera's expression was unreadable. "It seems your people are as impulsive with diplomacy as they are with emotions." Over the next few days, Robert found himself torn between his growing feelings for Nemera and his duty to prepare for the incoming humans. He tried to explain the intricacies of human courtship, the subtle dance of flirtation and attraction. "So these dates," Nemera said as they walked through a Vernalian botanical garden, "they're like practice for potential mating?" Robert choked back a laugh. "Not exactly. They're more about getting to know someone, seeing if you're compatible." Nemera's brow furrowed. "But how can you not know if you're compatible? Surely your scientists have developed tests for genetic and psychological matching." "We have those," Robert admitted, "but they can't account for chemistry, for that spark between two people." "Spark?" Nemera looked alarmed. "Humans generate electricity when mating?" This time, Robert couldn't contain his laughter. "It's a metaphor, Nemera. It means a special connection, something you can't explain, only feel." Understanding dawned in Nemera's eyes. "Ah, Like the way I feel when I'm with you. The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Robert's heart raced. He reached out, his fingers brushing against Nimera's hand. She didn't pull away. The moment was shattered by the sound of engines overhead. They looked up to see a massive starship descending through Vernalis atmosphere. "They're early," Robert muttered. The arrival of the human contingent sent shockwaves through Vernalian society. The newcomers, while well-intentioned, brought with them a whirlwind of unfamiliar emotions and behaviors. Robert watched with growing unease as young Vernalians began mimicking human courtship rituals. Public displays of affection, once unheard of outside mating season, became increasingly common. "This is unprecedented," Nimera said, her voice tight with worry. "Robert, some of my people are experiencing arousal cycles completely out of sync with our biological norms. If this continues, it could destabilize our entire society." Robert ran a hand over his face, guilt gnawing at him. "I'm sorry, Nimera. I never meant for this to happen." She placed a hand on his arm, the gesture both comforting and electrifying. "I know, but we need to find a solution quickly." Their research took on a new urgency. They pored over Vernalian biological data, searching for answers. As they worked, Robert couldn't help but notice the changes in Nimera herself. Her touches lingered longer, her gaze often drifting to his lips when he spoke. One evening, as they huddled over a microscope, examining Vernalian cellular structures, Nimera suddenly straightened. "Robert," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I think I'm experiencing attraction, outside of mating season." His heart pounded. "Are you sure?" She nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "My body temperature is elevated. My pulse is rapid. And when I look at you, I feel... Robert stepped closer, drawn by an irresistible force. "What do you feel, Nimera?" "Everything," she breathed. Their lips met in a kiss that sent shock waves through both their bodies. It was tentative at first, then deepened with a hunger neither had expected. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "That was..." Nimera began. "Yeah," Robert agreed. A sharp knock at the lab door made them jump apart. A stern-faced Vernalian official entered, flanked by two guards. "Dr. Palmer, Dr. Nimera," he said, his tone grave. "The High Council requests your immediate presence. There have been incidents. The human presence is causing widespread physiological changes in our population. If a solution is not found quickly, I'm afraid all humans will be asked to leave Vernalis." Robert's stomach dropped. He looked at Nimera, saw the conflict raging in her eyes. They had unlocked something profound, beautiful, and potentially devastating to an entire civilization. As they followed the official out of the lab, Robert's mind raced. They had to find a way to bridge the gap between their species, to find a balance between Vernalian biology and human emotion. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and somewhere, beneath the weight of that responsibility, a small, selfish part of him wondered, if he was forced to leave Vernalis, would Nimera choose to go with him? The High Council chamber was a marvel of Vernalian architecture, its organic curves and bioluminescent accents a stark contrast to the tension filling the air. Robert and Nimera stood before the assembled leaders, acutely aware of the gravity of the situation. High Counselor Zix, a statuesque Vernalian with deep green skin and piercing gold eyes, addressed them. "Dr. Palmer, Dr. Nimera, you understand why you've been summoned?" Robert nodded, his throat dry. "We're aware of the physiological changes occurring in the Vernalian population." "Changes?" Zix's voice was sharp. "Dr. Palmer, we are facing a potential biological crisis. Reports of out-of-season arousal are flooding in from every corner of our world. Productivity is plummeting. Social norms are crumbling. And at the center of it all, human influence." Nimera stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor Robert detected in her hands. "High Counselor, with all due respect, we believe this situation presents an opportunity for growth for both our species." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Zix's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The human capacity for constant emotional connection, while foreign to us, has undeniable benefits," Nimera continued. Their societies have achieved great things, driven by love, passion, and empathy. At what cost? Another counselor interjected. Look at the chaos their emotions have wrought on their own world. Robert felt a surge of defensiveness. We've made mistakes, yes, but we've also created art that moves the soul, music that transcends language. We've pushed the boundaries of science and exploration, driven by the desire to connect, to understand. He glanced at Namira, drawing strength from her presence. And now, here we are, reaching across the stars to forge a bond between our peoples. Isn't that worth the risk? The chamber fell silent, the counselors exchanging meaningful looks. Finally, Zix spoke. Your words are compelling, Dr. Palmer, but they do not change the fact that our biology is fundamentally different from yours. We cannot simply adopt human emotional patterns without severe consequences. Then let us find a middle ground, Namira said, her voice filled with conviction. Robert and I have been researching the cellular changes occurring in affected Vernalians. We believe it may be possible to develop a treatment that would allow our people to experience a more moderated version of human emotional capacity. Excited whispers filled the chamber. Zix leaned forward, interest gleaming in her golden eyes. You truly believe this is possible? Robert nodded. With more time and resources, yes. We could potentially create a way for Vernalians to experience emotional connections outside of mating season, without the overwhelming intensity that's causing such disruption. Zix was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving between Robert and Namira. Finally, she spoke. You have 1 month. If you cannot produce results by then, all humans will be required to leave Vernalis. And Dr. Namira, you understand the personal risk you're taking by pursuing this research? Namira straightened, her chin lifted in defiance. I do, High Counselor, and I accept it gladly. As they left the chamber, Robert's mind whirled with the enormity of the task ahead. He turned to Namira, concern etched on his face. Are you sure about this? If we fail... She met his gaze, determination blazing in her violet eyes. If we fail, we lose everything. But if we succeed, Robert, we change the course of history for both our peoples. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining. Besides, I've already experienced something extraordinary with you. I'm not ready to let that go. Robert's heart soared, even as the weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. They had 1 month to bridge millions of years of evolutionary divergence, to find a way for logic and emotion to coexist in harmony. As they hurried back to the lab, a new energy pulsing between them, Robert allowed himself a moment of hope. They were explorers on the frontier of a new kind of science, one that blended biology and emotion in ways never before imagined. The lab hummed with frenetic energy as Robert and Namira raced against time. 3 weeks had passed since their audience with the High Council, and the situation on Vernalis had only grown more dire. Reports of emotional instability among the population flooded in daily, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of Vernalian society. Robert rubbed his bleary eyes, staring at the holographic display of Vernalian cellular structures. There has to be something we're missing, he muttered, frustration edged his voice. Namira placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch both comforting and electrifying. We'll find it, Robert. We have to. He turned to face her, struck once again by the depth of emotion in her violet eyes. Over the past weeks, as they'd worked tirelessly side by side, their bond had only grown stronger. Every shared breakthrough, every late-night discussion about the nature of love and biology had brought them closer together. Namira, he said softly, I need to ask you something. She tilted her head, curiosity playing across her features. What is it? Robert took a deep breath. If we can't solve this in time, if I have to leave Vernalis, would you come with me? The question hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and fear. Namira's eyes widened, a mix of emotions flashing across her face. Before she could answer, an urgent chime cut through the tension. Incoming transmission from the High Council, the lab's AI announced. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing High Counselor Zix's stern visage. Dr. Palmer, Dr. Namira, she said, her voice tight with barely contained anger. The situation has escalated beyond our worst fears. There have been riots in the capital. Families are being torn apart as individuals succumb to these human emotions. Robert's stomach dropped. Hi, counselor. We're close to a breakthrough. We just need more time. Time is a luxury we no longer have, Zix cut him off. The council has voted. All humans are to be evacuated from Vernalise within 48 hours. Namera stepped forward, her voice sharp with defiance. You can't do this. We're on the verge of a solution that could revolutionize both our societies. Zix's golden eyes narrowed. Dr. Namera, your own behavior of late has not gone unnoticed. Your judgment in this matter is compromised. With all due respect, High Counselor, Robert interjected, anger rising in his chest. Namera's compromised state has led to more scientific breakthroughs in the past month than your society has seen in years. You're throwing away an opportunity for growth out of fear. A tense silence fell over the lab. Finally, Zix spoke, her voice cold. You have 48 hours, Dr. Palmer. Make your preparations to leave. The transmission cut off abruptly. Robert turned to Namera, his heart racing. We need to work faster. There has to be something we've overlooked. Namera nodded, determination blazing in her eyes. Let's go over everything again, from the beginning. They dove back into their research with renewed vigor, poring over data on Vernalian physiology, the chemical composition of the lumina flowers, and the subtle changes observed in affected individuals. Hours blurred together as they worked, fueled by desperation and the growing realization that their time together might be coming to an end. As the first hints of dawn began to color the Vernalian sky, Robert's eyes widened in sudden realization. Namera, he breathed, look at this. She hurried to his side, peering at the complex molecular structure displayed on his screen. The pheromone compound from the lumina flower? Robert nodded excitedly. Yes, but look closer. See how it interacts with the Vernalian neural receptors? It's not just triggering a hormonal response. It's activating dormant neural pathways. Understanding dawned in Namera's eyes. Pathways that, in humans, are always active. Exactly. Robert's fingers flew over the interface, pulling up more data. What if we could create a compound that mimics this interaction, but at a much lower intensity? It could allow Vernalians to experience a broader range of emotions without the overwhelming intensity of mating season. Namera's face lit up with excitement. And if we could make it adjustable, individuals could control their own emotional state. They worked feverishly, synthesizing and testing various compounds. As the deadline for human evacuation drew nearer, their desperation grew. Finally, with only hours to spare, they achieved a breakthrough. It works, Namera whispered, staring at the test results in awe. Robert, it actually works. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, overwhelmed by a mix of relief, joy, and lingering fear. As they broke apart, their eyes met, and the air between them crackled with unspoken emotion. We need to present this to the council immediately, Robert said, his voice husky. Nimra nodded, a flicker of nervousness crossing her face. Robert, whatever happens, I want you to know that these past weeks with you have been the most extraordinary of my life. He cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. For me too, Namera. For me too. The High Council chamber was packed to capacity as Robert and Namera presented their findings. They explained the science behind their discovery, demonstrating how the compound could allow Vernalians to experience a controlled range of emotions without disrupting their natural cycles. As they finished their presentation, a heavy silence fell over the chamber. High Counselor Zix leaned forward, her expression unreadable. This is unprecedented. If what you say is true, it could change the very foundation of our society. That's precisely the point, High Counselor, Robert said, his voice firm. Change isn't something to be feared. It's an opportunity for growth, for both our peoples. Zix's eyes narrowed. And what of the risks? How can we be certain this compound won't have unforeseen consequences? Namera stepped forward, her chin lifted in defiance. There are always risks in scientific advancement, High Counselor, but the potential benefits far outweigh them. This compound could allow our people to experience the depth of human emotion while maintaining our unique biological rhythms. It's the best of both worlds. The counselors murmured among themselves. the tension in the room palpable. Finally, Zix spoke. We will need time to consider this proposal and conduct our own tests. In the meantime, the evacuation order for humans will be temporarily suspended. Relief washed over Robert, but it was short-lived. Zix continued, her gaze sharp. However, to ensure there is no further contamination of our population, all humans will be confined to their quarters until a final decision is reached. Robert's heart sank. He turned to Nymeria, saw the conflict raging in her eyes. They had bought some time, but at what cost? As they were led out of the chamber, Nymeria suddenly stopped. She turned to face the council, her voice ringing out clear and strong. There's something else you need to know, she said, her eyes finding Robert's. I've experienced these emotions firsthand. I've fallen in love with Robert Palmer. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Robert's heart pounded as Nymeria continued. This love has not weakened me or distracted me from my work. If anything, it has made me stronger, more driven to find solutions that benefit both our peoples. It has shown me that emotion and logic are not mutually exclusive, but can coexist in beautiful harmony. She reached out, taking Robert's hand in hers. Our two species may have evolved differently, but at our core, we share the same capacity for connection, for growth, for love. This compound isn't just about controlling emotions. It's about opening ourselves up to new possibilities, to a future where Vernalians and humans can truly understand and learn from each other. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices. Robert squeezed Nymeria's hand, overwhelmed by her bravery and the depth of his own feelings for her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Weeks passed as the Vernalian scientists rigorously tested Robert and Nymeria's compound. The human population remained under strict quarantine, but Robert and Nymeria were granted special permission to continue their research under close supervision. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of waiting, they were summoned back to the High Council chamber. High Counselor Zix's face was solemn as she addressed them. Dr. Palmer, Dr. Nymeria, after extensive testing and debate, the Council has reached a decision. Robert held his breath, acutely aware of Nymeria's presence beside him. We will proceed with a controlled introduction of your compound to the Vernalian population, Zix announced. However, participation will be strictly voluntary, and the long-term effects will be closely monitored. Relief and joy washed over Robert. He turned to Nymeria, saw his own emotions reflected in her violet eyes. Zix continued, Furthermore, we have decided to establish a permanent scientific exchange program between Vernalis and Earth. We believe there is much our peoples can learn from each other. As they left the chamber, Robert's mind whirled with the implications of the Council's decision. They had done it. They had bridged the gap between two vastly different species, opening the door to a future of collaboration and understanding. So, Nymeria said softly as they walked through the corridors of the science complex, what happens now? Robert smiled, taking her hand in his. Now we keep exploring, together. Nymeria's answering smile was radiant. I like the sound of that. As they stepped out into the Vernalian sunshine, Robert marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had overcome biological differences, cultural barriers, and the fear of the unknown. In doing so, they had not only changed the course of two civilizations, but had found something precious and rare, a love that transcended the boundaries of worlds. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and discoveries yet to come. But as Robert looked at Nymeria, he knew that whatever the universe had in store for them, they would face it side by side, their bond a testament to the power of understanding, acceptance, and love. Together, they stepped forward into a future bright with possibility, ready to write the next chapter in the grand cosmic story of connection and growth.